buried for centuries, their voices refused to die.
The birth of a pawn in an empire of thrones. The year is 1601. Spain stands at the height of its golden empire. Its banners flutter across oceans, its gold fills cathedrals, and its faith burns through every heart. In the palace of Valladolid, where walls glitter with tapestries and incense thickens the air, a child's cry breaks the stillness. Anna Maria Mauritia de Austria, daughter of King Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, is born not into a family but into a contract with destiny. From the moment of her first breath, her life is measured in treaty. Every smile, every lesson, every step of her childhood will serve a purpose greater than herself: to bind empires, to preserve dynasties, to maintain the delicate balance between Habsburg Spain and Bourbon France, two powers destined to clash for supremacy over Europe. Anne grows amid marble halls, veiled chapels, and endless ceremony. She learns to pray before she learns to play, to bow before she learns to laugh. Priests teach her Latin hymns, tutors drill her in the etiquette of queenship. When she kneels before the gilded altar, her small hands clasped in devotion, courtiers whisper, "Behold the future Queen of France." She does not yet understand what France means, only that it is far away, cold and foreign. Childhood without childhood, unlike other royal children who sneak into gardens or chase doves across courtyards. Anne's days are a ritual of discipline. Their mother, Queen Margaret, is stern but kind, teaching her that virtue is armor. Her father, distant yet proud, sees in her another tool of diplomacy. Spain in the 17th century is an empire held together by piety and power, and daughters are its currency. Anne's brothers and sisters are scattered across the map like chess pieces. One will rule the Netherlands, another will marry into the Holy Roman Empire. Anne's own fate is sealed by papal ink and ambassadorial signatures before she even turns 10. In letters exchanged between Madrid and Paris, envoys speak not of affection but of strategy. France is ruled by King Henry IV, a monarch recently converted from Protestantism to Catholicism to secure peace. His marriage to Marie de Medici has produced heirs, but peace between France and Spain is still fragile. A marriage, a double marriage, is proposed. Anne to Louis, the Dauphin of France, and Henry's daughter Elizabeth to Anne's brother, the future Philip IV. The idea pleases both crowns. For the Habsburgs, it ties France to their blood. For the Bourbons, it promises the end of decades of war. Anne is only 10 when she learns that her destiny is to marry a boy she has never met. The death of a king and the weight of expectation in 1610. When King Henry IV of France is assassinated by a fanatic in Paris, the political world trembles. His 9-year-old son, Louis XIII, becomes king, though the throne is truly ruled by his mother, Marie de Medici. The Queen Mother, Italian by birth and cunning by nature, sees the Spanish alliance as both a blessing and a threat. She agrees to the marriage but watches Spain with suspicion. Anne, now 14, spends her final years in Spain preparing for a kingdom she does not know. Every lesson is meant to mold her into the perfect consort. Gracious, devout, silent, her confessor warns her that France is a place of temptation, that its court dances on the edge of sin, that its women are proud and its men cunning. She listens, though in her heart she wonders whether love can exist amid politics. The journey across the Pyrenees, the year 1615, dawns with banners of gold and crimson across Iberia. The time has come. 2 royal caravans begin their slow, ceremonial approach to the Isle of Pheasants, a small island in the Bidasoa River that marks the border between France and Spain. There, on neutral ground, the 2 brides will be exchanged. Imagine the scene: 1,000 horses, velvet canopies, silver coaches reflecting the autumn sun. Priests chant blessings while soldiers keep uneasy watch. For a moment, peace seems tangible, shimmering in the air like heat. Anne steps down from her carriage. She wears a gown of white silk embroidered with golden lilies, a symbol of France. Her face, pale from the journey, is framed by a stiff lace ruff. She carries herself with the poise of someone far older than 14. Across the river, another young girl, Elizabeth de Bourbon, mirrors her movements. They will trade lives, languages, and destinies. When Anne crosses the bridge into France, she leaves behind not just her homeland, but her identity. Spanish courtiers hand her over to French officials. Her attendants are dismissed. Her Spanish gowns are replaced by French fashion. Even her name is altered. Anna becomes Anne. Her prayers now whispered in the tongue of Paris. Narrator. In that moment, a child ceased to be herself. She became a treaty in flesh and silk. The awkward union Anne's first meeting with Louis XIII is almost painfully silent. He is 15, pale, serious, and already burdened by the expectations of kingship. His shy eyes meet hers, but there is no spark, no joy. They are strangers who share a crown. The wedding takes place on November 25, 1615, in the Cathedral of Saint-Andre in Bordeaux. Trumpets blare, crowds shout, "Vive le roi! Vive la reine!" Yet beneath the golden ceremony lies uncertainty. The young king barely speaks. The queen smiles dutifully. When the ceremony ends, they bow to one another like actors who have rehearsed their lines but do not understand the play. That night, the palace hums with celebration. Dancers twirl, wine flows, and musicians play into the small hours. But within the royal chambers, silence reigns. The royal marriage is unconsummated. Anne lies awake beneath silk sheets, staring at the ceiling painted with cherubs. She wonders if this is what queenship feels like, a performance without applause. The stranger in the Louvre when Anne arrives in Paris. She is met with cold curiosity. The Louvre Palace, vast and echoing, is a world of etiquette and intrigue. Her new mother-in-law, Marie de Medici, dominates the court. Behind her smiles lies calculation. She sees Anne not as a daughter, but as a rival for influence over the young king. Anne tries to please everyone. She dresses in French styles, attends every mass, every hunt, every performance. Yet the courtiers whisper behind their fans, the Spanish bride is too proud, too pious, too foreign. She speaks French haltingly, with a musical accent that fascinates some and irritates others. Her devotions, long hours before the chapel altar, earn her the reputation of a fanatic. The French see her as the hand of Spain in their midst, a Habsburg spy hidden beneath a crown. Her letters home are cautious, coded in religious language. "Pray for me," she writes to her brother, "for I live among strangers who smile without warmth." Each letter is read by censors before it leaves France. The marriage remains cold. Louis XIII, awkward and withdrawn, spends his nights in council meetings or with his hunting companions. He trusts few people and shows little affection. Anne, sensitive and emotional, longs for tenderness. When they are seen together, it is for ceremony only. To the public, they are king and queen. In private, they are two lonely souls. Whispers and wounds by 1617, the first cracks begin to show. The assassination of Concini, Marie de Medici's favorite, shifts power abruptly. Louis takes control of his throne at last, sending his mother into exile. The young king, finally free, begins to shape his rule, but also his mistrust. Anne, caught between mother-in-law and husband, finds herself isolated. She corresponds secretly with her brother, now King Philip IV of Spain, out of homesickness. The French ministers intercept her letters. Suddenly she is accused of treasonous communication with Spain, her own family. Narrator. A queen may have many titles, but not one of them protects her from suspicion. Her confessor, a Spanish friar named Father Coulson, is dismissed. Her ladies-in-waiting are replaced by French ones loyal to Richelieu's faction. The once welcomed bride has become a political liability. Faith is refuge amid the hostility. Anne finds solace only in religion. She sponsors convents, visits hospitals, and spends hours in prayer. At night, she walks the palace gardens under a veil, whispering to the statues of saints. She clings to the belief that suffering purifies the soul, but faith cannot warm an empty heart. Each year without a child deepens the sense of failure. The court begins to murmur. God has cursed this marriage. Some blame Anne's Spanish blood, others the king's coldness. Physicians, midwives, and astrologers all offer explanations. None provide comfort. Anne endures it silently. She knows that to cry is to appear weak, and weakness invites vultures. A queen without a kingdom, the early 1620s turn darker. France and Spain drift toward conflict again despite their royal bond. Cardinal Richelieu, rising in power, views Spain as a threat and Anne as a potential traitor. Every move she makes is reported. When she attends Mass, they record who sits beside her. When she speaks, they note every word. Even her confessor is questioned. Louis grows more distant. His affections lean toward favorites like the Duke of Lyons, leaving the Queen alone in the vast chambers of the Louvre. She decorates them with relics of Spain, tapestries of Toledo, portraits of her parents, small fragments of a world that once loved her. Narrator: France had given her a crown, but not a home. Still, beneath the sorrow, something within Anne begins to shift. She watches, listens, learns. She studies the game of power that others play around her. If she cannot command love, she will command dignity. If she cannot influence the king, she will master patience. The child who once trembled before destiny now stands taller. Her silence becomes her weapon, her grace a shield. The courtiers who once mocked her begin to sense a quiet strength, a glint in her eyes that speaks not of defeat but of endurance. The foreshadowing of storms outside the palace. Europe is burning with the fires of the 30 Years' War. Inside, France simmers with unrest. Richelieu's spies weave webs around the queen, and each letter from Madrid tightens the noose. Anne prays more, speaks less. She understands that one wrong word could destroy her. Yet destiny has not finished with her. In the coming years, she will face humiliation, scandal, and near downfall, but also motherhood, power, and redemption. The queen who entered France as a shy girl will one day rule it as regent, guiding the Sun King himself. For now, she kneels once more before her bedside crucifix. A single candle flickers beside her as wind rattles the windows of the Louvre. Her lips move in prayer, but her eyes are dry. She does not pray for deliverance anymore. She prays for strength. The camera slowly pulls back through the darkened corridors, the whisper of her rosary echoing faintly against the stones. Narrator, softly. In a world ruled by men and shadowed by power, Anne of Austria began her reign not with triumph, but with silence. Yet within that silence, history was already listening. The candles in the Louvre Palace burn low, their flames trembling like secrets. The echo of footsteps along the marble corridor tells of a queen walking alone. A queen surrounded by 1,000 eyes, yet utterly unseen. Anne of Austria, still young, still graceful, still foreign, carries the weight of a crown colder than gold. She has been queen for 7 years now. 7 long, silent years, and still no heir to the throne of France. The queen in isolation, the courtiers whisper that the marriage of Louis XIII and Anne of Austria is cursed. The priests murmur that heaven disapproves of Spain and France's fragile union. And behind every whisper, a shadow listens. Cardinal Richelieu, the man who will one day be known as the architect of French power and the architect of Anne's misery. King Louis XIII has grown distant. Not cruel, but unreachable. His heart lies in his duties, his hunts, his private prayers. He sees Anne not as a companion, but as a symbol, the living reminder of his mother's old alliance with Spain, which he now resents. Anne's chambers are beautiful, but barren. Gilded ceilings, cold floors, walls covered in tapestries depicting saints who look down in judgment. Servants move like ghosts, obeying orders without warmth. At night, Anne kneels before her crucifix, whispering prayers in Spanish, the only sound that still feels like home. Her confessor is gone, dismissed under suspicion of spying for Madrid. Her letters are opened before they reach her family. She is queen in name, prisoner in truth. Narrator, a royal solitude is not quiet. It is a noise of whispers, a storm of eyes. And in that storm, even the purest heart begins to long for a voice that understands. The Duke of Buckingham in 1625, The air of Europe is thick with diplomacy and deceit. England, ruled by the young King Charles I, stands between France and Spain, a fragile bridge of alliances. When negotiations arise between the two kingdoms, England sends its most trusted and dazzling envoy, George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham. He is unlike any man Anne has ever met. Charming, bold, dressed not merely in finery but in confidence. His eyes carry a reckless fire, the kind that does not belong in palaces but in legends. He arrives in Paris under the pretext of escorting Princess Henrietta Maria, Louis XIII's sister, to her new husband in England. But his presence awakens a sensation in the French court. Half admiration, half scandal. Women envy him. Men despise him. Richelieu watches him like a hawk. When Buckingham first meets the Queen, the moment freezes time. She is in the gardens of the Louvre surrounded by ladies. Her gown glimmers with silver embroidery, her hair caught in the sunlight. The English Duke bows deeply, his hand pressed to his chest. "Your Majesty," he says softly, his voice deep, controlled, yet trembling with something unspoken. Anne's reply is polite, almost mechanical. "Welcome to France, my lord." But their eyes meet, and something shifts, not love at first sight, no, something more dangerous. Recognition, a reflection of loneliness in another's soul. The forbidden connection over the weeks that follow, their paths cross at banquets, diplomatic audiences, and religious ceremonies. Each time, conversation dances on the edge of propriety. Never too long, never too warm, but every word leaves an echo. Anne begins to notice small things. The way Buckingham's gaze lingers when others look away, the faint smile he hides behind courtly manners, the way he seems to understand the silence she lives within. At first, she resists. She must. She is a queen. And her every movement is recorded by eyes loyal to Richelieu. But isolation is a powerful enemy, and affection, even imagined, becomes a form of rebellion. Narrator, was not love she sought, but understanding. In the cold halls of politics, warmth becomes the most forbidden desire of all. Buckingham, in turn, becomes intoxicated by the Queen's grace. To him, Anne is the embodiment of every romantic ideal. Beauty wrapped in tragedy, faith bound by duty. His admiration crosses the line from diplomacy to devotion. He begins sending her small gestures. A poem, a ribbon, a flower passed discreetly by a lady in waiting. Each is returned without response, but never destroyed. Anne keeps them locked away, hidden behind her prayer books. The journey to Amiens in 1625, as political tensions shift, the English fleet arrives in France for negotiations. Buckingham is among the delegation. The French court travels north to Amiens, where festivities are planned in honor of the visiting envoys. It is here, historians believe, that Anne and Buckingham meet for the last time. In secrecy, surrounded by danger. Accounts vary. Some say they met in the gardens under moonlight. Others claim it was within the cathedral itself in the shadow of confessionals. What is certain is that the encounter burned itself into both their hearts. Buckingham, overwhelmed by emotion, is said to have fallen to his knees before her. "Oh, madam," he whispered, "if I could give my life for 1 hour of your peace, I would do so without hesitation." Anne, startled, trembled, torn between duty and compassion. "You must rise, my lord," she murmured. "You speak words that cannot exist between us." But his eyes, filled with passion and sorrow, made silence impossible. "Then let them vanish into the wind," he replied. "As long as they reach your heart once." She turned away before tears could betray it. That night, she prayed longer than she ever had before, begging God for forgiveness, not for sin, but for feeling. When Buckingham left Amiens the next morning, he carried with him a small token, a diamond clasp, one of the ornaments from the Queen's own dress. Whether she gave it to him, or he stole it in a moment of desperate sentiment, no one knows. But that single jewel would soon ignite one of the most famous scandals in French history. The scandal of the diamond clasp in the corridors of Paris. Whispers spread faster than fire. The Queen has lost her diamonds. The Duke of Buckingham has them in England. Oh, the king knows. Cardinal Richelieu, ever the manipulator, uses the rumor to deepen the rift between the royal couple. He quietly suggests to Louis XIII that Anne's heart, and perhaps her loyalty, belongs elsewhere. The king, already insecure, becomes suspicious. When Anne enters the council chamber, he avoids her gaze. When she speaks, he listens with cold indifference. Within weeks, the rumor grows into a full accusation. The affair of the diamond studs, as history will later call it, becomes the talk of every salon and tavern in France. Richelieu's agents spread the story that the Queen of France had gifted her husband's diamonds to an Englishman. An act not just of betrayal, but of political treason. Louis XIII demands an explanation. The Queen is cornered. In one of the most humiliating moments of her life, Anne is interrogated about her private life before her own husband and the cardinal. She denies everything, her voice steady, her hands trembling beneath the table. "Majesty," she says quietly, "I have never forgotten my duty, even when I was forgotten as a wife." The words cut through the air like a blade. The king looks at her, searching her face for guilt, for remorse, for truth. But Anne gives him nothing, only dignity. Narrator: a woman's virtue was a man's weapon, but Anne's silence became her armor. The aftermath: Richelieu, unsatisfied, keeps the queen under strict surveillance. Every lady of her household is questioned. Every letter is read. The Louvre becomes less a palace and more a cage. The Duke of Buckingham, meanwhile, returns to England obsessed. He speaks openly of his admiration for the Queen of France, reckless words that reach even Paris. He commissions portraits resembling her, keeps her likeness close, and once declares, "There is not a queen in the world worthy of her heart." To Richelieu, this is proof of Anne's indiscretion. To Anne, it is a curse. The queen's reputation is shattered. Though no evidence of wrongdoing is ever found, the damage is done. The court divides. Some pity her, others condemn her. And the king, torn between doubt and guilt, withdraws further into cold formality. The queen's despair winter descends over Paris. The gardens of the Louvre turn to frost. Anne walks them alone, her breath visible in the air, her heart heavier than ever. Her faith is now both comfort and torment. She prays not for love anymore, but for peace, a peace that never comes. In one letter to a trusted attendant, she writes, "Heaven has given me a heart too human for a queen, and for that I am punished daily." She feels eyes everywhere, servants watching, guards listening, courtiers whispering. Even the wind seems to carry judgment. At night, she dreams of the English Duke. Not his touch, but his words, his voice, the brief sense of being seen. Then she wakes in tears, ashamed. Narrator: in the legend of queens, sin is often a rumor and virtue a burden. Anne's isolation deepens. She loses weight, her health falters, and her enemies circle closer. Some suggest the king should annul the marriage. Others whisper that God has closed her womb as punishment. Still, she endures, with quiet grace, with a will that refuses to break. The death of a dream in 1628, George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham, is assassinated in Portsmouth, England. When the news reaches Paris, Anne's composure shatters for the first time. The chronicler Madame de Motteville later wrote, "Majesty received the tidings with a silence that was more terrible than grief itself. Her eyes, fixed on nothing, filled slowly with tears that she did not wipe away. No one knows what she truly felt, relief, sorrow, or guilt. But that night, she ordered the chapel candles to burn until dawn and did not speak a single word for 3 days." A narrator: some loves never live long enough to be confessed. They die nameless, and therefore eternal. The Queen's resolve the scandal of the diamonds fades with time, replaced by new intrigues. Yet its shadow lingers, shaping how France sees its queen. She becomes more cautious, more measured, less trusting. The warmth that once flickered in her eyes hardens into composure. She will never speak of Buckingham again. But those who saw her years later say that, in moments of quiet, her gaze would drift to the horizon, as though she still watched a ship vanishing into the English fog. Richelieu continues to dominate the realm, and Anne becomes his reluctant adversary. But now she knows the cost of vulnerability. She will never again let emotion endanger her crown. The girl who once prayed for love has learned a harsher prayer, one for survival. Narrator, a queen's heart cannot afford tenderness. In the mirror of power, tears are weakness, and weakness is death. She, Anne of Austria, walks through the echoing halls of the Louvre with her head high. The same courtiers who once whispered against her now bow in her path. They see dignity, serenity, sanctity. They do not see the storm that still lives quietly beneath her calm. The music swells, slow, tragic, beautiful. She has lost love, trust, and youth, but she has found her strength. The world that once sought to shame her will one day kneel before her as regent of France, mother of the Sun King himself. But that is another story, one born from ashes and crowned in light. Narrator softly, the queen's heart was wounded, but not broken. For some souls, sorrow was not the end. It is the forge. The camera fades in on a cold dawn over Paris. Fog clings to the same like ghosts refusing to leave. Bells toll from Notre Dame, solemn and distant. A kingdom awakening to intrigue once more. The Queen after Buckingham by 1628. The Duke of Buckingham is dead, assassinated in a crowded English port. The news travels across the channel like a curse. For Anne, it marks the death of her last illusion of warmth. But grief in a queen is dangerous, so she buries it beneath composure. In public, she wears mourning black. Not for the English Duke, but for the fallen souls of war. In private, her eyes remain dry, her prayers unspoken. Those close to her swear that something within her changed forever after that day. The soft-hearted young woman who once dreamed of affection becomes steel. Silent, deliberate, untouchable. Narrator, from love she learned pain. From pain she learned control. And in that control, Anne of Austria discovered the art of survival. Richelieu's watchful eye, but Cardinal Richelieu is not a man to forgive or forget. He still sees Anne as the greatest threat to his power. A queen with foreign blood, Catholic zeal, and connections to Spain. While the king's health wanes and his mind drifts between devotion and paranoia, Richelieu tightens his hold on the kingdom. France is now his chessboard, and Anne his most dangerous piece. He fills the court with spies, ladies who report on the queen's words, priests who reveal her confessions, even her own attendants bribed with jewels or titles. Each evening the cardinal reads reports by candlelight, his crimson robes casting a shadow like blood across parchment. Her Majesty spoke with the Spanish ambassador. Her Majesty received a letter without seal. Her Majesty walked the gardens alone after Vespers. Every act becomes a potential crime. Every silence a secret. Anne knows she is being watched. She learns to walk carefully, to speak with purpose, to let no emotion escape that can be turned into evidence. Narrator, they called her cold. They mistook wisdom for ice. For in the court of Richelieu, warmth was a death sentence. A web of intrigue, the years between 1629 and 1635 become a silent war. France is at conflict with Spain, and Anne's loyalty is constantly questioned. She cannot write to her brother, the King of Spain, without permission. She cannot send gifts, visit churches, or even donate to charities without scrutiny. Still, she refuses to be broken. Instead, she learns the language of secrecy, hidden letters, coded phrases, trusted messengers disguised as merchants or servants. Her ally, Madame de Chevreuse, becomes the queen's lifeline. Beautiful, reckless, and cunning, Chevreuse carries Anne's secret correspondence through Paris, to friends, to sympathizers, to anyone who can help the queen maintain her dignity against Richelieu's encroaching power. But every alliance is dangerous. Chevreuse is eventually caught, her letters intercepted. Among them, hints of Anne's secret communications with Spain. The discovery strikes like thunder through the court. Richelieu moves swiftly, confronting the king. "Your Majesty," he says, "the queen's loyalty is compromised." Louis XIII, weary and mistrustful, summons his wife. The Queen on trial, the confrontation is silent, suffocating. In the royal chamber, under the eyes of Richelieu, the king accuses her of treason, of conspiring with Spain during wartime. Anne listens, her face calm, her hands folded before her. "Her Majesty," she replies softly, "I am daughter to Spain, but wife to France. My prayers for peace are no treason." Richelieu intervenes sharply, his voice slicing the air. "A peace can be treason when it serves an enemy crown." Anne's eyes meet his, calm, fearless, cold. "Then, Your Eminence," she says, "perhaps the crown should also accuse the angels who pray for peace in heaven." The king looks away. Richelieu's silence burns with fury. After hours of questioning, no proof is found. Yet the damage is done. The queen's household is purged, her confidants exiled, her correspondence seized. She is confined to her apartments in the Louvre, a queen reduced once again to a prisoner. Narrator. The walls of her palace had changed, but her chains had not. In every monarchy, a woman's silence is her last defense, and her greatest weapon. Letters in the shadows, it is during this confinement that Anne's courage hardens into strategy. She begins to play Richelieu's own game. Patience, deception, and intelligence. Her letters to Spain become rarer, shorter, coded through symbols of devotion or prayer. She learns to speak through intermediaries, to trust no one fully. Every act of communication is now an act of rebellion. One surviving fragment from that era, written in cipher, reads, "If they take my hand, I will write with my heart. If they take my voice, I will speak with my silence." The queen begins to gain quiet admiration among courtiers. They see her endurance, her composure under pressure. The rumors of scandal that once haunted her now fade into awe. Richelieu senses it, he fears it. Narrator, a rumor can destroy a woman, but endurance can make her immortal. The shadow of treason by 1637, Richelieu's spies intercept a series of letters once again linking Anne to Spain. Known to history as the Val de Grâce affair, this time the situation is dire. France is at war with Spain. If the Queen's guilt is proven, she could face exile or worse. The Cardinal orders a full investigation. Anne's rooms are searched, her chests opened, her attendants interrogated under threat of torture. The scene is brutal. Soldiers overturn her belongings, rosaries, letters, prayer books, keepsakes. One maid faints under questioning. Another weeps and confesses she carried messages but knew not their contents. Anne stands silently, surrounded by chaos. The chief investigator demands she confess. Confess, Your Majesty," he says coldly, "and the king may yet show mercy." Anne's reply is steady. "I have nothing to confess but patience." When Richelieu confronts her personally, the exchange becomes legendary. He says, "Your Majesty underestimates my reach." She answers, "And Your Eminence underestimates my faith." He leans forward. "A faith will not save you from politics," she whispers. "And no? But it may save me from becoming like you." The cardinal leaves, his expression unreadable. For the first time, perhaps, he realizes the queen's strength lies not in influence, but in moral defiance. The king's stout Louis XIII, frail and haunted by illness, struggles between suspicion and remorse. He visits Anne one evening, his hands trembling. "They say you have betrayed me," he murmurs. Anne looks at him, her eyes tired but honest. "I have betrayed nothing but my loneliness, sire." The king turns away, ashamed. For a moment the old distance returns, that gulf that neither love nor fear could bridge. But even Louis begins to see what Richelieu cannot. Anne's endurance is not treachery, but quiet dignity. The cardinals fall. Richelieu's health begins to fail by 1642. Years of power and paranoia have worn him thin. As his influence wanes, Anne grows stronger. The court begins to shift, subtly, silently. Old enemies of the cardinal look toward the queen with new loyalty. The king's ministers begin to treat her with deference, and when Richelieu dies that year, his empire of control dies with him. Narrator, the queen did not strike her enemy down, she outlived him. In courts and wars alike, survival is the rarest form of victory, and does not celebrate. She merely kneels in the royal chapel, lighting a candle for the soul of the man who tormented her for 2 decades. Those who see her weep silently that night cannot decide if her tears are of forgiveness or relief. The Queen's redemption in 1643, King Louis XIII himself falls ill, pale, exhausted, broken by guilt and suspicion. He summons Anne to him to his bedside, perhaps realizing too late the injustice of years. He whispers, "Forgive me, Anne." She answers softly, "God already has." When the king dies, the court braces for chaos, but fate, at last, gives Anne the role she was denied all her life. Regent of France, ruling on behalf of her young son, Louis XIV, the future Sun King. The same courtiers who once mocked her now bow in reverence. The same palace that once imprisoned her becomes her throne of power. Narrator, the queen who was accused of treason now commands the kingdom. The woman they called silent becomes the voice of France itself. Her first act as regent is simple but symbolic. She restores the exiled servants who once stood by her side, Chevreuse, Motteville, and others. The palace fills once again with warmth, loyalty, and grace. And as she stands before the young Louis XIII, the child who will one day embody the glory of France, she smiles for the first time in years. Anne's voice, softly, "You will be sunlight, my son, and I will be your shadow." The transformation under her regency, France stabilizes. The wars that once tore the nation begin to settle. Her partnership with Cardinal Mazarin, Richelieu's successor, brings balance, wisdom, and diplomacy. No longer the lonely foreign queen, Anne becomes a symbol of endurance, intelligence, and motherly devotion. But in quiet moments, she still carries the ghosts of her past. The whispers of scandal, the lost diamonds, the English duke, the cold eyes of Richelieu. Narrator, but power had not erased her sorrow, it had merely crowned it. Anne of Austria, once the most watched and judged woman in Europe, finally commands respect. Yet behind the grandeur of her new role, she never forgets what it cost her. The years of silence, humiliation, and grief. She knows too well that every crown is forged from heartbreak. Closing scene, the camera fades to her private chapel at dusk. Candles flicker against the golden icons. Anne kneels alone, her rosary glimmering faintly. Her prayer is simple, not for power, not for peace, but for mercy upon all who have loved and lost in silence. Narrator, final lines of Part 3. In the Chronicles of France, her name will be written beside kings and cardinals, but history will never tell how much of her strength was born from pain. Anne of Austria, the queen who fought without a sword, ruled without cruelty, and survived without love. When King Louis XIII died in 1643, France stood at the edge of uncertainty. The throne belonged to a child, Louis XIV, only 4 years old, and power, for the first time in decades, rested in the hands of a woman. That woman was Anne of Austria. The same queen who had once been spied upon, silenced, accused, and humiliated now stood as the regent of France, the guardian of a kingdom and mother of its future king. The weight of the crown, her first act as regent, was a declaration not of vengeance, but of forgiveness. She lifted the restrictions that Richelieu had placed on her. She recalled her old friends from exile, restored her attendants, and reopened her chambers to light and laughter. The courtiers who had once doubted her were astonished. Gone was the fragile queen they remembered. In her place stood a woman of quiet authority. Anne's face was calm, her words measured, her decisions precise. She had learned diplomacy from Richelieu's cruelty and patience from her own pain. But she was not naive. She knew that the same nobles who bowed before her now would betray her the moment power wavered. Yours is a kingdom of masks, she once told a confidant, and I have worn mine longer than most. At her side stood Cardinal Mazarin, the Italian protégé of Richelieu. Cunning, intelligent, and politically astute. He was less feared than his predecessor, but equally skilled at the art of survival. Anne trusted him completely, perhaps because he too understood what it meant to be an outsider in France. A mother's strength for the first time, Anne found purpose beyond survival. She poured her heart into her sons, Louis and Philippe. Louis the Elder carried an air of quiet majesty even as a boy. Observers would later say that Anne raised him not as a child, but as a symbol, a living embodiment of France's dignity. She taught him that kingship was not simply rule, but theater. Every gesture mattered, every silence was a statement. When courtiers came to see the young king, Anne would stand beside him and whisper softly, "Remember, my son, you are the sun. They will orbit around you, whether they love you or not." Louis listened. He learned to stand tall, to speak rarely but decisively. From his mother's poise, he inherited the aura that would one day earn him the title the Sun King. The shadow of rebellion, but power never rests without envy. The nobles of France, long suppressed under Richelieu's iron hand, saw the regency of a woman as an opportunity to regain control. They despised Mazarin for his foreign birth and resented Anne for her authority. They whispered that she was of the Spanish queen ruling France through an Italian priest. Taxes rose to fund the ongoing wars, and the common people began to starve. Discontent spread through Paris like wildfire. By 1648, that discontent erupted into open revolt. The Parliament of Paris refused to approve the crown's new taxes. Riots broke out in the streets. The siege of Paris, Anne faced her first crisis with unshakable calm. When the mob surrounded the Palais Royal, demanding reforms and threatening the royal family, courtiers begged her to flee. But the queen refused. "But I will not run from my own people," she said. "You let them look upon their queen and see she does not fear them." Crowds filled the squares, shouting curses against Mazarin, calling for his head. Stones shattered palace windows. Soldiers turned their weapons against each other. Through it all, Anne stood firm. She spent nights in prayer beside her sleeping sons, listening to the distant rumble of rebellion. Her faith, once a refuge of sorrow, became now a shield of strength. Yet even she knew that defiance alone would not save the crown. She began negotiating in secret, playing the nobles against one another, promising reforms she never intended to grant, delaying decisions until the tide turned. "A queen cannot win through swords," she once said, "only through patience sharp enough to draw blood." Her patience paid off. Within months, divisions fractured the rebellion. The nobles, driven by their own ambition, turned against each other. But the peace was short-lived. The Fronde returned, stronger, bloodier, more desperate. Exile and return in 1649, Anne was forced to flee Paris under cover of night with her sons and Mazarin. The royal family rode through icy roads, escorted by loyal guards as angry mobs roamed the streets behind them. The journey was perilous. When Anne re-entered the capital, the same crowds that had once screamed for her downfall now cheered her return. She did not gloat. She did not punish. She simply raised her hand in blessing. "The Queen forgives," she said. "Oh, but France must remember." Her calm mercy impressed even her enemies. Her legacy burned in him like an invisible flame, the Queen's shadow even after her death. Anne's influence haunted the corridors of Versailles. He rarely mentioned Anne in public speeches, but privately he revered her. "My mother's strength," he told his minister Colbert, "was the kingdom's salvation before I could even lift a sword." It was not flattery. It was truth. Without Anne's regency, there would be no Versailles. They tried to make me a pawn, it might say, but I became the hand that moved the board. The light that flickers through the stained glass seems to form a faint crown over the altar. A silent reminder of a woman who lived between power and devotion, between love and loss, between sun and shadow. But outside the chapel, she was a sovereign, commanding armies, negotiating peace, and outmaneuvering men who underestimated her. That duality defined her, faith and fire, mercy and manipulation, grace and defiance. She was not saintly, yet not sinful, not purely victim, yet not villain. The last light there is a story, perhaps apocryphal, that when Anne of Austria lay dying, she asked the nuns of Val de Grâce to open her window. As the sun set, golden light spilled across her bed, illuminating her frail hands.